Hi everybody. So I hope you all have had a chance to view the contour drawing video where I drew some leaves by really looking at the leaves and not looking down at the paper. So we're going to carry that one step further and do graphite pencil work on our leaves. Here's a few examples that my high school kids had done. And what I had done is have them do little drawings of different nature things and then do the calligraphy to describe them. But as you can see, all the values, and they used erasers to lift out veins that were light. And then the real magic is the cast shadows. So I'll have more photos of these on the Google Classroom lesson. Another thing that I will show you on Google Classroom, and I'll have it downloaded, is the step-by-steps to this realistic graphite nature drawings. Okay, so I'm going to use these leaves, and I also took a photograph of it so that I have that to look at especially for shadows. I put the leaves under a really direct light so you could really see some cast shadows on there, although this isn't too bad. Okay, so the first thing I did was a gesture drawing, and what that is, let me grab a paper here, and many of you have done this before, is you think about the placement on the page. And also, if you want to do a preliminary drawing on newsprint, which I suggest, make sure you have a piece of newsprint the same size as your final paper that you're going to be using. So I have some photos of how the different steps looked, and I'll have those on the Google Classroom. So the idea is that you sort of figure out the placement and the size, and you kind of keep your pencil loosely going around the page until you sort of have it placed on there. And then you can do a few of the details. Once you get that gesture drawing on there, then you can start doing the contour. But I would suggest a modified contour where you're looking at your paper a little bit more so you can get placement correctly. And again, don't discount these moth-eaten leaves, caterpillar-eaten leaves. They kind of have a little bit more character than perfect leaves. You want to have the interest of it. And then you also want to consider, again, all of the inside contours and so on. So I did that, and and on the modified contour, you can use an eraser. If you don't like what you see, go back in an eraser, and you're peeking at your paper a little bit more to get things in the right place. So I've done that, and then I took some graphite transfer paper, the Sorel paper. I taped down my preliminary into the correct place, and I saw that it was a little too close to the edge, so I moved it over more and I moved it down so there was more space around it. And by putting this in there, and you don't have to kill it when you transfer it, just do it fairly lightly, because really you don't want outlines on your final realistic drawing. In real life, there aren't outlines around things. There's just value or color against color. So I left this one empty so you can kind of see how it goes. Right now, it has no veins on it. And have your reference always there so that you can continue to improve upon it. So if you see something that you missed on your contour, you can do it on the transfer. And so I'm going to kind of change that a little bit because I'm seeing that I was a little bit off. And I'm pushing hard enough to see that it's there. And it's a good idea on the first few strokes to check and make sure that you're able to see it. And again, you don't have to do it too hard. And then I added, from looking at the photograph, I added the cast shadows. So I'll go ahead and put those in there. And they're a little bit different than the lighting that I see right here, but I'll go with that strong side light that I had from the photograph. The photograph doesn't show the actual veins as much, so it's nice to have both of these things. And I use a red pen so I can see what I missed. I just realized I hadn't done that part, so now I'm ready. If you want to leave your drawing taped to it, you can. And I'm going to go in with a kneaded eraser, a squishy eraser, and kind of lift up some of my lines so they aren't as strong. Now the next step is to start adding the values. But if you have light veins or an area that you want to have linear light areas, you can do what's called an impress line. So what we're going to do is kind of damage the paper a little bit, and this would be a good time to put a magazine under it, something that's a little bit. Let me see if I can put that. So something that has a little bit of give to it. So it's squishing it down a little bit more. Oh, and I also wanted to mention that I'm just using regular 80-pound white drawing paper, but this vellum Bristol or the plate finish Bristol is also really nice paper, really heavy and good paper for this. You figure you're going to spend quite a bit of time on this, more than an hour probably, to get this down. It depends on how complicated. Remember, you can have just one leaf if you want, you want to have a good piece of paper so that your final drawing looks good. Okay, so I have my tracing paper over it, and I'm going to notice where the white veins are, and I'm going to push really hard. So I'm getting, and I might not use the time to do all of them, but I'll just do this one so you can see. I'm not doing it on the outside edges, just anything that's going to be light, and it's a linear kind of thing. Now maybe I'll do it a little bit on this too. And now not all leaves are going to have white veins, so you might not even need to do this particular step. There's other ways to create the white veins. Now I can feel this, that's why they call it an impressed line. I can feel where I've dented the paper. So what that means is that when I add the pencil over it, it'll kind of skip over that little canyon and leave a white area. So now we're ready. This is a fairly dark leaf, but you are getting some sheen on it where the light's hitting. And this is a nice little thing. You can get it online, and I do have some if anybody wants to borrow some from me for the course. You just have to let me know and come on over. So what you want to do is look at the values. And if you look at the values of the leaf and later on check the values on your drawing, so this was, you know, that light. You want to maybe imagine that your leaf is, you know, I'm thinking it's going to be about that value or this value on most of it, but not everywhere. And this is not really clear right here, but you can see it's got some definite light areas where the light was hitting it. So that area would end up being maybe there or there. And the other, so you can use this as a value checker, value meaning how dark or how light it is. So to apply the color, you want to have all of your pencils. And so I've got my dark pencil, my 6B. I've got a B, which is a little bit lighter. Then I've got a 2H, which is very light. And I've got an 8B, which is really dark, and so on. So I've got my dark and my light pencils. So I can just take, let's say on this one, I see most areas are fairly dark. I can just take my 6B pencil and start to color. And you can see how that, and I'm doing this really, really lightly. This is a 6B, so even though I'm doing it lightly, it's creating a fairly dark value. If I use the 2B and use that same pressure, I would get a much lighter value. So do you see how that impressed line is picking up? Now I am getting some marks as to the I'm kind of going back and forth as to the pencil strokes. So I might not want to have that. So here's where I can use my blender. You can use a tissue or a blending stump. Okay, and then later on you can clean up that. So you can see how the impressed line is working really well. Another way, when I really like this method, is to take some pencil. You can use your graphite stick. I have a 6B. Or just scribble some pencil on there. You can do it like this. And then wrap a tissue around your finger like this, and you're picking up some graphite. And you can just lay it on there, and you're going to get that nice smooth value there. So that's another good way to do it. So let's give that base coat, which is fairly dark, to the whole leaf. Oh, don't want to forget our powdered graphite. Some of you guys came over and got some from me. So I'm gonna, oh, and you can use a blending tool or a Q-tip to do this, but if you're going over a large area, the Kleenex is probably the best. So I'm going to dip my Kleenex in that and put it on here, because you're going to get way too much. But look at that strong color. So I'm going to go over that. And don't worry too much if you go out of the lines, because that's what the erasers are for later. So see how I've gotten that nice base coat on there? And I can do that on, that's that powdered graphite is really nice. Take this magazine away. So, even though I said we're probably going to have hours of work here, you can get, fairly quickly, you can get some color on there. And this is great if you're doing a portrait of somebody. You can get those skin tones on there nice and smooth without showing those pencil lines. So I've got that. Now I can go in and look for some highlights. You can definitely see some on there. Let's pretend I had really applied this better. I see some really nice darks on there, so I'll go in and And of course, you can use the pencil. This is actually a woodless graphite. It's all graphite, and it's a 6B, and I love this. So I'm going in. Oh, hands will get all full of graphite. So a good thing is to have a little piece of paper and have that underneath your fist, because you want to rest your wrist on there. So I'm going in and working on that nice dark area. And it's a slow process. You can play some quiet music and just really enjoy. I'm going to go right up to the edge. Enjoy this peaceful process until you make a mistake, and then you're swearing and saying, I'll never draw again. But hopefully that won't happen. So I'm blending it. So I'm squinting my eyes. When you squint your eyes, those darks and lights really pop out at you. Our tendency is to go a little too light and not dark enough, so don't worry if you feel like, oh, I think I went too dark. You can always lift it. So here's a 3B. So you can see that's not quite as dark. You can experiment with your different pencils. So I'm going in and trying to get all those dark areas. I think I'll go back to my dark pencil. This is actually an 8B, which is really fun. It's easy to get lost. But the nice thing is nobody's really going to know what that original leaf looked like. So it doesn't matter if you're a little bit off on where you put your values. And you do want to go right up to the very edge so that you eat up any outline that you might have. You don't really want to have, let me go into this. You don't want to really have an outline showing. You want to have only color against color. Okay, so let's pretend I had gotten most of this done. Now, the cast shadow, let's just assume that the cast shadow is going to be the darkest thing on there. So even though this was a white surface, it really blocked the light. So I'm going to go in with my darkest dark, and let's find that that 8B again. Oh, where did it go? Here it is. And I'm going to push really hard and get a super dark dark. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that graphite does not go all the way to black. And that's okay. Just go as dark as you can go. Don't think, oh, I better switch to a charcoal pencil. Don't mix charcoal and graphite. It has a completely different look to it, and it'll actually stand out. Now, here's where I was suggesting leaving this on here, but in case you wanted to add something. But at this case, I might get an edge. I can kind of see where the edge of the paper is, so I'm going to take this off at this point carefully. And keep this, because you could end up doing another drawing, like maybe with watercolor, and I'll show you a little bit that with ink and watercolor later, and try a different version of it. For those of you that love color, it might be fun to do. Okay, so I've still got my little paper under my fist. And there's that magic of the cast shadow. That'll really make it seem trompe-l'oeil. Pop off the page, fool the eye. And again, great to have these little Q-tips or blending tools to smooth it all out. Now, I know some of you, like Marianne and Richard and Pat for sure have done a lot of this before, so try and challenge yourself and do, or just try a different leaf than you've never had before. So I'm going to remember that I can always clean up smudges later on with this little kneaded eraser, squishy eraser. Now here's another thing. This click eraser is nice. I'm not sure what I've got going on there, but let me see if I can cover that up. My world drawing board has seen better days, so probably should be using a different one. So even though I haven't gone all the way to the edge, this acts as a drawing tool. So it's actually applying color. And I forgot to transfer, or I forgot to draw in this little thing. And that will be white. See how it's, there might be a little cast shadow, but I'm gonna erase out. Don't do this, but below it, or you can get a brush. I'm gonna grab a brush here. And maybe put in some, a little bit of shadow in there. So it looks like a hole. Okay, so the click eraser is also a way to get some light lines. So if you didn't want to do impress line, there's some tertiary veins in there, some little tiny ones, so you could go in and erase those out. So let's say I wanted to erase out those. The other thing that's really cool is this little electric eraser. And when you first put the little eraser piece in, it's got a nice clean edge. So you kind of have to be careful because it'll, but look what that does. So that's another neat way to get that. So eraser stick, impress line. Okay. So I would continue on with that until I feel like my drawing is complete. On this little document that I'm going to put on the classroom, at the end you want to evaluate. It says, hold it away from you, stand back from it and analyze, how does it look? Are there dark enough darks? Are the dark and light values on the form? Are there obvious textures? Is the cast shadow a number 10 dark, 10 being as dark as it gets and white being the white of the paper? Have all the outlines been eliminated? So here I still have an outline. It's because I haven't brought the dark all the way up to it yet to eat it up. So I would be going in and bringing my dark all the way up so that I don't have an outline, but I have a value against value. If you have a very light leaf, you're going to have a different situation than this very dark leaf. Use a value scale at that time and maybe check, and so you could go back in and really check if your values are dark enough, and then you have all the values. And then at the very end, you carefully erase all your smudges that you might have gotten, from your hand or from going over the edge. So you can use the kneaded eraser or your eraser stick. And, okay, so that's the beginning of doing this, and you would continue to keep working. Let me just talk for a second about some other, those of you that love color might want to do this, is, just go in and use Sharpie pen or a Pitt pen. These are some kids' examples. And then put watercolor on it in different darks and lights. So these are contours with that have gone over. Here's an example that I was showing my students. So you use a waterproof pen and watercolor. And here's another example of the geraniums. And on this, some of the geraniums have that red center, so you can do it wet into wet and let it run. And here's a few little examples from my sketchbooks. Let's see what I have here. So here's one I did. I sat up in the garden and drew the zucchini, and went in with Pitt pen, and I think I used a crayon for the yellow veins and the red lines in the zucchini. This is just some studies out in the yard and if you want to include flowers and leaves, that's fine. You know, you guys have fun with this. Here's one of some different leaves. And this takes a little longer if you're doing a lot of them, and I'm filling the page and putting a little border. So that's another option. Here's one I used, a Tombow pen, which runs when you get it wet, and then put a sort of a wood grain border in it. This one is uses the whole spread of the sketchbook, and again, some leaves and Pitt pen. This was at the Bernardo Winery, and you know, all those little antiques they have there, and some succulents, so I was doing that on location. So that's another idea. I hope I remembered everything. So here's the drawing. And don't forget to look at the steps, and don't forget to view the contour drawing video. So, bye.